This here's Ghost Stories, y'all, Episode 7, The Beckoning Hands. The basins of the Roanoke and Chowan rivers were two of the earliest centers of civilization in the New World. Many beautiful homes were built along their shores, and towns such as Plymouth and Edenton played an important part in the settling of the province of Carolina, both under the Lords Proprietors and under the royal governors. Most of the mansions built along the lovely shorelines were the creations of planters and import merchants, but at least one was built at the direction of a famous pirate who wanted not only a secure place to keep his plunder, but also a comfortable and gracious showplace where his noble friends, governors, and statesmen and such could be entertained in a gracious style to which they were accustomed. After all, he considered himself a sort of important merchant, too. You see, even in those days, it was not unusual for some of the more successful criminals to want to cross the line into respectability for themselves and their families. The edifice of which we speak is still standing on the top of a small but high bluff overlooking the Chowan River. It was carefully planned down to the last cubic foot. Its masonry walls are very thick, almost like a fort, making it nearly soundproof and very easy to heat in winter and cool in the summer. A large basement gives opening to a brick-lined tunnel that descends through the heart of the bluff to a well-concealed door at the level of the river. This made the unloading of boats a very practical manner, as well as a very private one. No prying eye could possibly see what was being transferred from rowboats to the mouth of the tunnel, or vice versa. The high ground upon which the house is located afforded an excellent lookout both up and down the river, so the occupants had ample notice of the approach of any travelers by water and could take any steps they considered expedient. As most travel in those days was by boat, the beautiful home was indeed a very snug and secure nest. At the will of the owner, the splendid structure could be either a fort or a gracious palace. It was built by the most skillful artisans and of only the very best materials obtainable from the seven seas of the world. In addition to the stones of which the basic structure was built, there were rosewood, mahogany, and teak wood from the tropics, and golden oak from the timbers of captured ships. The house was built with all the meticulous attention to detail and strength that the skilled boatwright is accustomed to putting into the building of an ocean-going vessel. It is still sound and secure down to this very day. Perhaps the most striking feature of the interior of the mansion was the grand entrance. Here a huge hall was lighted by sterling silver sconces bearing wax candles that blazed brilliantly. A very wide staircase opened just opposite the massive front doors. Made of highly polished mahogany, the staircase swept upward in a graceful flare and opened on an upstairs hall, which served as a passageway to the rooms of the upper floors. Carpeted with fabulous oriental rugs, the hall and stair gave dramatic welcome to the house as one entered the front doors. The rugs are no longer there, but that magnificent staircase still sweeps in its graceful and imposing curve, inviting the guest to enter and explore the regions above. Large parlors and dining rooms opened off this large entrance hall, and in its early days, a kitchen was located to the rear of the house, providing easy and direct access to the dining room through a butler's pantry. The only trouble was that the family of the would-be respectable pirate would never live there with him. His lovely young wife did not approve of his piratical ways, nor of his affairs with other ladies of the area. But she was also apprehensive about a curse that had been laid on her pirate husband by an old hag who lived in Nag's Head Woods. It seems he had pressed or kidnapped the old woman's son, an only child, into service aboard the pirate ship. The boy had subsequently been killed during an attack upon a merchant ship, and the old crone blamed the pirate captain for depriving her of any hope of grandchildren. In spite of a rather large sum of money given to her by the buccaneer, she swore a curse on his head to effect that he, too, should never know the joy of being a grandparent, but that his line should be cut off for all time and forever. It was shortly after news of this malediction reached her that the brigand's wife left him and took their daughter back to her hometown of Charleston, South Carolina. She maintained separate quarters in a lovely house there, and the pirate was free to visit her and their beautiful young daughter, Caroline. Several years later, the pirate captain caught a fever in the West Indies and died aboard ship. He was buried at sea according to the custom of the Brotherhood of the Sea, and his faithful first mate then sailed openly into Charleston Harbor to carry the news of his passing to his widow. He also carried his captain's sword, other personal belongings, and the shipmaster's share of the accumulated loot, which amounted in value to a sizable sum. This, together with her other holdings and previous gifts from her husband, left the widow quite comfortably fixed. Among the properties inherited by the widow and her daughter was the beautiful mansion overlooking the river, and the two of them soon took up residence there. It was much cooler in the summers, and the winters did not seem to be as piercingly cold or damp. The house was magnificently appointed and very comfortable, and the neighbors on adjoining plantations were what was termed quality folk. All in all, it seemed a nearly ideal place to complete the rearing of a daughter. Caroline grew in grace and in beauty, and soon was the toast of the entire region. The great stone house often rang with music and merriment as the young folk of the province gathered for extended home parties that lasted several days at the very least. Life was pleasant, unhurried, and serene. There was plenty of delicious food, plenty of good and genteel company, plenty of light and laughter, and above all, plenty of time in which to live the good life to the fullest. Or so they thought. Youth and laughter and friendship blossomed into love for the beautiful, diminutive Caroline, and wedding arrangements were soon made for her marriage to the scion of one of the oldest and wealthiest families in the entire Roanoke, Chowan area. The wedding ceremony was to take place at the home of the bride, and invitations went out to all the great and many of the near great in that whole region. It was to be a brilliant social affair, with the ceremony to be performed by a visiting bishop of the Anglican Church. The house was beautifully decorated with Christmas decorations, for the ceremony was to take place on New Year's Day, still a part of the Christmas season. A string orchestra was brought in from Edmonton to furnish the wedding music, and the days preceding New Year's were an endless round of parties and holiday festivities. The wedding day arrived at last. The bishop made an imposing figure in his vestments as he stood very erect, prayer book in hand, ready to perform the nuptial ceremony. He and all the other guests were assembled in the great hall. The nervous young bridegroom was in his place beside the bishop, and the bride was to enter from a dressing room located just off the great hall. The orchestra struck up the wedding music, played it once, then again, but the bride did not appear. The bishop cleared his throat and glanced over at the mother of the bride, who was beginning to experience the first symptoms of panic. A chill of premonition gripped her, and she remembered the curse of the nag's head hag. Then, from above the level of their heads came a very feminine giggle. All eyes snapped immediately to the head of the huge stairway, and there they beheld the bride in all her wedding finery, looking down at them with twinkling eyes and with a teasing smile on her pretty lips. She looked no bigger than a child as she stood there, radiantly happy, and the most beautiful thing the bridegroom had ever seen. In spite of warnings that he must not look upon his bride in her wedding dress until she stood beside him at the altar, the young man could not take his eyes off her. Tiny Caroline stood there for a brief moment, poised like a bird. She was reveling in the adoration and adulation flowing toward her from her beloved and her friends on the floor below. Then, with an impish grin and looking directly into the eyes of her fiancé, she taunted, "Catch me, and you may kiss me." She tossed her pretty lace-bedecked head and beckoned to him with both her hands. Turning, she ran swiftly along the upstairs hall and disappeared around the corner. Accepting the challenge, the young bridegroom leaped forward and ran up the broad stairway, 3 steps at a time, until he reached the hall above. Then he turned in the direction his beloved had taken and ran down the hallway after her. There was no Caroline. Up and down the halls he ran and into all the rooms, and still he could not find his bride. Calling her, he begged her to come out of her hiding place, as the wedding guests were becoming restless, and the bishop was distinctly annoyed at this frivolous interruption of the religious ceremony. Soon, amusement or annoyance turned into genuine concern, as the whole wedding party joined in the search for the missing girl. The great stone house was searched thoroughly, and the grounds around the house were carefully explored for hundreds of yards, but without producing a sign of the young girl. No strangers had been seen in the vicinity, and there was no known wild beast thereabouts that was large enough to have carried her off. No boats were missing from any of the piers along the waterfront. Caroline had just disappeared without a trace. After several months of futile search, Caroline's bereaved mother closed up the big stone house and moved away. It is said that the mysterious disappearance of her lovely daughter continued to grieve her and stayed on her mind so much that she soon became deranged and would talk of nothing but her lost bride girl. There is no doubt that her grief shortened her life. The poor troubled lady died without ever finding out what had become of Caroline. The very next year's night, 1 year to the day after the strange disappearance, some children in the neighborhood of the great stone house came home badly frightened and told their parents of seeing a ghostly white face floating and flitting from window to window inside the closed mansion. They said the thing beckoned enticingly with two ghostly white hands. Their frightened parents forbade them to go ever again upon the grounds of the old pirate's mansion. Of course, being children, they did go back, but none of them was ever harmed. Year after year, always on New Year's night, the pallid face and beckoning hands continued to appear in the windows of the house until the ghost became a local and then a regional attraction. Many brave people tried to solve the mystery of the apparition, but when they gained admittance to the house, the phenomenon always vanished with a long and pitiful sigh. The old pirate's beautiful home became known as the house with the beckoning hands, and prudent people avoided it whenever they could. Nevertheless, many upright and reliable people of unquestioned sobriety, swore that they continued to see those beckoning hands and that pitiful face. But no one could solve the mystery. Then, years later, a man who had made a deep study of such things rented the house from its owners to try to get to the bottom of the strange occurrence. Many believed he was a little touched in the head to be searching for a solution to a mystery that had gone unexplained all those years. He actually moved into the house to try to obtain firsthand the feeling and the mood of the place. All by himself, he searched the house from top to bottom again and again. He never actually saw the beckoning hands or the wistful face, but but he was convinced that his neighbors were telling the truth. Then, on New Year's night, after he had waited in vain for the apparition, he fell asleep in the huge feather bed in the master bedroom of the house. As he slept, he dreamed a very vivid dream. He dreamed that he was witnessing the strange interrupted wedding ceremony of many years before. He saw all the actors in the event as though from a vantage point above and beyond the wedding party, so he could see all of them at one time. In his dream, he saw the bridegroom leaping up the stairs in pursuit of his young, lovely bride, and he saw tiny Caroline turn and run down the hall in mock fright from her beloved. And then he saw it. As Caroline dashed along the hall and turned a corner, she lost her balance in her long wedding dress and fell against the wall for support. Her steadying hand reached into a secret crevice in that stone wall and touched a secret lever. He saw a trapdoor open beneath her feet, and he caught a flash of wedding finery as she fell through that trapdoor and into a secret windowless room beneath. He saw the trapdoor reclose as the heavy stone flooring turned up upon its metal pivot and glided into place, locking shut with a metallic click. In his dream, Caroline was entombed alive. The sheer horror of his vivid dream shocked him into consciousness, and he awoke with a scream. Did his ears betray him, or did he hear the high-pitched cackle of an old hag? As he rolled from his bed, the first light of a winter dawn was breaking over the eastern sky. Without more ado, but trembling as if he had an ague, our researcher went directly to that portion of the hall he had seen so clearly in his dream. The stone wall was still there, and so was that secret crack or joint between the stones. Pushing his hand wrist deep into the aperture, he felt the end of a rusty metal lever, which, with great exertion, he was able to move. Slowly, and with a great groaning sound, as though it were reluctant to reveal its secret, the huge stone in the floor began to swing on its now rusty pivot until it stood fully open. A vagrant beam of sunlight fell directly into the opening before him. There on the floor of that secret room, he beheld a tiny human skeleton, almost as small as a child's, the bones of both hands extended along the floor in a beckoning gesture. On the head of the skeleton, there was a trace of ancient white lace, almost like snow upon its brow, the wedding veil of lovely Caroline. And thus was the mystery finally solved. The remains of poor Caroline were given Christian burial, and the treacherous trapdoor was sealed shut so that it could never again imprison an unsuspecting traveler along that hallway. The beckoning hands? Well, most of the people in the neighborhood will tell you that they disappeared from that day on. But there are others who will tell you that they can still be seen, but only on a dark New Year's night. They are beckoning, ever beckoning.